From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Have you ever come across a story that just stops you in your tracks? Makes you think, wait, how did that happen?
Definitely. And this case we're looking at today feels exactly like that.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher. We're talking about U.S. immigration policy, a father living in Maryland, and a pretty big intervention by the Supreme Court.
It pulls you right in. And the more you look, the more you see it's about these, really fundamental clashes between different parts of our government.
The man at the center is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Lives in Maryland, has a work permit, married to a U.S. citizen, 3 kids. Sounds pretty settled, right?
Building life, yeah.
But then, just last month, bang, he's deported. And not just anywhere.
No, he's sent to a terrorism confinement center in El Salvador.
And here's the kicker, the really crucial bit. Back in 2019, an immigration judge specifically said he shouldn't be deported to El Salvador.
Right, because of the danger from gangs there. He had protection, withholding of removal, it's called.
So there was an official finding, a legal order saying don't send him there.
Exactly. Which makes the fact that he was sent there, well, highly problematic.
Which is why the Supreme Court got involved. They actually told the Trump administration, you need to help get him freed.
That's not something you hear every day.
Yeah.
The highest court stepping in like that on an individual deportation case.
So that's what we're diving into, how this all went down, the legal back and forth, and, what it means bigger picture.
Yeah, because this isn't just about one person's situation, unfortunately. It touches on huge themes: due process, executive power, the court's role.
It really forces you to think about how the system is supposed to work and what happens when it seems to break down.
Absolutely. So let's peel it back, starting with that initial deportation.
Okay, so recap. 2019, judge says, danger in El Salvador, don't deport him there. Legal protection is in place.
A legally binding decision. Should have been a flag in the system, you'd think.
But March 12th, 2025, ICE arrests him. And just 3 days later, March 15th, he's on a plane to El Salvador. That seems incredibly fast, doesn't it?
It's remarkably swift, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially given that protection order. It raises questions about, the checks and balances within the deportation process itself.
And the administration, the Trump administration, they've actually admitted part of it was wrong.
They have. They conceded deporting him to El Salvador was an administrative error, their words, because of that 2019 order.
So they admit they sent him to the one place the judge said not to.
Precisely.
But this is but they don't concede that removing him from the U.S. in the first place was wrong.
No, they maintain that part was justified. Their reasoning: they claim he's a member of MS-13.
Which his lawyers strongly deny, we should say.
Absolutely. It's a contested allegation. And this whole renewed focus by IEC seems linked, contextually anyway, to Secretary of State Marco Rubio declaring MS-13 a foreign terrorist organization.
Okay. So that designation might have sort of put people with alleged ties, even historic or disputed ones, higher up the priority list for removal.
It likely broadened the criteria or intensified the focus, yeah. Even for someone who had protection based on other dangers, like the gang threats Abrego Garcia faced from MS-13, ironically enough, according to his lawyers.
So the alleged MS-13 link becomes the reason for removal, even if the destination was admittedly an error. Wow. Okay, so let's talk about where he ended up, this CECOT place.
Right, the Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo. It's described as an infamous prison, a terrorism confinement center.
So not your standard holding facility.
Definitely not. It's built for high-security prisoners, specifically those accused of terrorism or serious gang crimes in El Salvador.
And the U.S. government is connected to this. I read something about funding.
Yes, there's a reported deal. The U.S. paying El Salvador something like $6 million to house certain U.S. deportees in facilities like CECOT.
$6 million. That suggests a level of partnership there, doesn't it? Using Salvadoran prisons as part of U.S. deportation strategy.
It certainly implies coordination. And you had the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, actually tour CECOT. She called it a tool in the U.S. toolkit.
A tool in the toolkit. That quote hits differently now, knowing that's where they sent someone who had protection because of gang threats.
Exactly. And his lawyers are making that point very strongly. They're saying his life is genuinely at risk in CECOT.
Because it's full of gang members, the very people he fled from.
Precisely. He fled El Salvador as a teenager because of gang threats. Now he's been deported back and put into a prison filled with alleged members of those same groups. The danger seems incredibly real.
The irony is just stark.
It really highlights the potential tragic consequences of these policies when things go wrong, or maybe even when they go as intended under certain interpretations.
And it wasn't just lawyers raising alarms. We saw chatter online, like on Reddit.
Yeah.
People were deeply worried.
Yeah, concerns about the conditions in Salvadoran prisons generally, which are known to be harsh, but also specific fears for him. Fears he could be targeted, silenced.
It brings home the human reality behind the legal jargon. You know, real fear, real danger.
Absolutely. These aren't abstract legal points. They have life or death implications for the person involved.
Okay, so wrongful deportation destination admitted he's in a dangerous place. This obviously leads to a legal fight.
It did. Back in Maryland, a judge didn't just sit back. She ordered the Trump administration, bring him back, set a deadline.
A direct order to the executive branch. That's the judiciary stepping in.
That's the check and balance in action, trying to correct what the judge saw as an illegal act, deporting him despite the protection order.
But the administration, the Justice Department, they pushed back hard. They said it was impossible.
Their argument was essentially, he's not in our custody anymore. He's being held by El Salvador, a sovereign nation. We can't just snap our fingers.
So they took it to the Supreme Court, asking them to block the judge's order.
Yep. Which sets up this classic confrontation, right?
Yeah.
Executive branch saying, foreign affairs, sovereignty, our hands are tied. Judiciary saying, you broke the law, fix it.
It really puts that separation of powers doctrine to the test.
Big time. How far can a court order the executive branch to act when it involves another country?
Chief Justice Roberts first put a temporary hold on things, right? An administrative stay.
Correct. That just paused the deadline, gave the full court time to look at the emergency appeal. Standard procedure.
But then came the actual ruling from the Supreme Court, and they mostly sided with the lower court, didn't they?
They did, largely. They said the government must facilitate his release from El Salvador and ensure his immigration case proceeds as if he'd never been wrongly deported.
Facilitate, that's the key word there. It's a strong directive, basically saying, figure it out. You caused this mess, you need to help clean it up.
It's a significant pushback against the idea that the government could just wash its hands of the situation because he was now physically elsewhere due to their own admitted error.
But they did pump the brakes on one word the lower court used. Effectuate.
Right. They sent it back to the lower court on that specific point. The Supreme Court seemed worried that ordering the government to effectuate, to make happen his return, might be going too far.
Interfering too much with the executive's power over foreign relations?
Exactly. Facilitate means help, assist, make easier. Effectuate sounds more like a direct command to produce him, which could involve ordering actions within another country's territory, and that gets tricky constitutionally. The court was drawing a line there.
Interesting distinction. So help make it happen, but we're not ordering you to force El Salvador to release him.
That seems to be the nuance, yeah. And they also told the government, you need to tell us exactly what steps you've taken and what you plan to do.
Keeping them on a short leash, basically, demanding transparency and accountability.
It shows the court wasn't just issuing a vague statement. They wanted concrete follow-up.
Now, there was also that separate statement from Justice Sotomayor.
Yeah, joined by Justices Kagan and Jackson. And it was powerful.
What was her main point?
She went further than just the facilitate order. She stated flatly there was no basis in law for his arrest, his removal, or his imprisonment in the first place. Full stop.
Wow. So not just an error in destination, but the whole thing was illegal in her view?
That's what she argued, pointing directly back to that 2019 protection order. She really hammered the point that this wasn't just a minor oversight, as the government tried to frame it.
And she raised a pretty scary hypothetical, didn't she?
She did. She argued that if the government's logic held that they can't be forced to undo a deportation once the person is gone, then what stops them from deporting anyone, even a U.S. citizen, super quickly before a court can step in?
Chilling. That really gets to the heart of due process concerns.
It absolutely does. Her point is about preventing the executive branch from being able to bypass judicial review through sheer speed and then claiming impunity.
Sotomayor also brought up international law.
Yes, the Convention Against Torture. She emphasized the U.S. has obligations under that treaty, especially given the alleged risks he faces in CCOT. It adds another layer, human rights obligations.
And she pointed out something else. that the government actually has ways to deal with this.
Right. She noted they have their own internal policies for facilitating the return of people who were improperly removed, specifically so their immigration cases can continue.
So the argument that bringing him back is some unprecedented, impossible task, it doesn't quite hold water according to their own procedures.
That's the implication of her statement. It suggests the means exist, raising questions about the will to use them in this case.
Okay, so the Supreme Court rules. Sotomayor issues her statement. But the drama wasn't over. The administration missed the deadline set by the lower court judge, didn't they?
They did. The judge had set a Friday morning deadline for them to detail the steps they were taking.
Yeah.
The administration said that was impracticable.
Impracticable, that word again. Suggests they weren't exactly jumping to comply.
It certainly reads that way. They asked for more time until the following Tuesday.
And the judge's reaction?
Not happy. She gave them 2 extra hours.
2 hours, not days.
2 hours. A pretty clear sign of her frustration and insistence on urgency.
What was the Justice Department's reason for needing more time?
They argued they needed time to, quote, review the Supreme Court's order and figure out what facilitate meant, given he was held by a foreign sovereign.
They needed days to understand the Supreme Court's ruling about their own admitted mistake. That sounds thin.
The judge seemed to agree. She found that argument unconvincing.
And Abrego Garcia's lawyers, they must have been furious.
They accused the administration of defiance. They kept pointing back to how fast he was deported 72 hours from arrest to El Salvador. Why, they asked, is bringing him back taking so long and meeting such a resistance?
That contrast is hard to ignore. Deportation in 3 days, return, TBD.
It's a powerful point they kept making. The judge reiterated her stance. The deportation was illegal. Needing time to read the Supreme Court's decision wasn't cutting it for her.
So what did the judge do then, after the 2-hour extension?
She amended her order slightly. She took out the word effectuate following the Supreme Court's guidance, but kept the pressure on. The revised order directs the administration to take all available steps to facilitate the return as soon as possible.
So still demanding action, just using the Supreme Court's preferred term.
Exactly. Trying to balance upholding the law with respecting the separation of powers regarding foreign relations while still demanding results.
And I read something about a lawyer being suspended.
Yeah, reports surfaced that a Justice Department lawyer involved in the case was suspended internally after the government acknowledged the deportation error.
Interesting. So there were at least some internal consequences for the mistake.
It suggests the error was recognized as significant within the department itself, yes.
Okay, stepping back now. Let's talk broader implications. What are the big takeaways here?
Well, first, this whole situation really puts a spotlight on the potential for clashes between the branches of government. Legal experts were genuinely concerned this could escalate into a kind of constitutional crisis.
The executive saying we can't, the judiciary saying you must.
Exactly. Especially when it involves sensitive areas like immigration and foreign policy intersecting with individual rights.
And this wasn't happening in a vacuum, right? The Supreme Court was dealing with other immigration cases around the same time.
That's right. It's part of a larger ongoing legal conversation about the scope of executive power in immigration matters. This case is one piece of that puzzle.
It also just fundamentally makes you ask, what are the rights of someone facing deportation, especially if they have a court order supposedly protecting them?
It really tests the strength and reliability of those protections.
Yeah.
If an order like the one Abrego Garcia had can be, well, overlooked or bypassed even temporarily, what does that mean for the rule of law in the immigration system?
Raises serious questions about due process, absolutely.
And then there's the government's core argument in resisting the return order. The he's in another country's custody argument.
Yeah, that one feels particularly sticky, especially since the U.S. pays that country to hold deportees.
It's deeply troubling. If that argument holds, it suggests the government could potentially make a wrongful deportation irreversible simply by quickly handing the person over to another country, even when they have agreements with.
It almost sounds like a loophole created by their own error.
That's the concern, yeah. It challenges basic notions of accountability. If you make a mistake, you're generally expected to fix it, not argue that the consequences of your mistake make it impossible to fix.
So summing it all up then, the main point is the Supreme Court did rule against the administration on the key issue.
Yes. They acknowledged the wrongful deportation to El Salvador and ordered the administration to actively facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. That's the bottom line from the highest court.
But it's not over.
No, definitely not. The legal battle continues in the lower court, with the judge pushing for concrete steps and timelines. It's very much an ongoing situation.
Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question to chew on, doesn't it?
I think so.
What does it actually mean for a government to facilitate someone's return when they're held by another country, especially when the whole situation stems from the first government's admitted mistake? What are the limits? What are the responsibilities?
It's a complex knot of legal and ethical questions. International law, diplomacy, governmental power, basic human rights. It all gets tangled up here.
Yeah.
How the U.S. handles this will say a lot.
For Abrego Garcia, obviously, but also for how we understand due process and accountability moving forward.
Absolutely. So if this case has grabbed your interest, it's definitely one to keep following. Check the news updates. It touches on so many critical debates happening right now about immigration, law, and the balance of power.
Definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Feel your best and amplify your everyday look with Thrive Cosmetics. Go to thrivecosmetics.com/shine26 for an exclusive offer of 20% off your first order. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/shine26.